Over the weekend, the Taxpayers Union, who are an interesting group of individuals, but who have a primary interest in, I guess, two things. One, the strength of the New Zealand economy, but also the schematics that underlie it, but also the cost of living for New Zealanders and proper public spending. I guess that's the best way to describe it. The way in which we spend public money, it being properly appropriated. A sort of a mini audit office, really, in lots of ways, although they begin campaigns because they have argued for a long period of time now that the last people who should be spending your money essentially are the government, because the government does such a crap job of spending it and doesn't usually derive the outcomes from the expenditure that they seek. So over the weekend, they have started and launched a new campaign, which is very much aimed, I would suggest to you, at the new Minister of Finance, Nicola Willis, suggesting that, to be honest with you, what's the difference between her and her predecessor, Grant Robertson, in the sense that Nicola Willis is on track to deliver a budget, they say, that spends $30 billion more next year than Mr. Robertson spent during the COVID lockdowns. And they're looking for support now to stop the clock and avoid your household's debt bill. They go a long way further than that, but joining us to talk about that is the Taxpayer Union's campaign manager, Connor Molloy, and he joins us now. Connor, welcome to the show. Good morning to you.
Morning, Michael. How are you?
Listen, in your missive that has gone out to various media and interested individuals and economists, I guess, and those with an interest in New Zealand's finances over the weekend, you've reproduced a couple of paragraphs from Auckland New Zealand Herald columnist Matthew Hooton, in which Hooton warns that New Zealand is on the same path as Argentina to essentially a completely broken economy from which creditors will leave and essentially a path of wreck and ruin will follow. Is that too extreme?
I think the important thing, that we were trying to highlight there is that, government debt on Sunday night hit $90,000 for every household in the country. And I think the point is here that no one seems to be taking that seriously. Nicola Willis, in terms of government debt, has said in her budget policy statement that they intend to get that back towards 30% of GDP. Grant Robertson was, pre-COVID forecasting to be spending 28.8% of GDP. So, in essence, Nicola Willis is promising to spend and borrow more than Grant Robertson was. This should be a big wake-up call. And, Argentina did fall into that trap. They thought we're a wealthy country, things are going well. They started implementing bad policy and thought that they could use, redistributive economics and a lot of, leftist or Keynesian economics. And, they've ended up in the gutter. And so, I really worry for New Zealand that we're heading down the same path if we don't, urgently change tack.
There isn't a political commentary or economic commentary that I've read in the last probably 2-3 years, Connor, which doesn't mention that New Zealand has these two words, an infrastructure deficit, which seems to me that we don't have enough roads, we don't have enough buildings, we don't have enough schools, we don't have enough hospitals, we don't have enough stuff to therefore drive the economy forward. And that means if you've got an infrastructure deficit, and forgive me, but as a layman, I'm assuming you've got to spend billions, probably tens of billions of extra dollars to reduce that deficit and create the environment in which you can then create economic growth. You could only do that by borrowing. So how does that all work out, Connor?
So there's a couple of things. So there's two different kinds of borrowing, as I put it, in the broad sense. The first one is, if you compare the government to a household, it's borrowing to pay your weekly bills, your groceries, and all of that kind of thing. I don't think anyone would think that is a good way of spending money. But that is exactly what the government is doing right now. They're borrowing, in essence, to often actually pay interest on their current borrowing. The second way is borrowing in order to spread the cost over the lifetime of a particular asset or an investment, for example, infrastructure, roads, hospitals, those kinds of things. If it's going to be shared over, taxpayers for the next 30 or 40 or 50 years, it makes sense to spread that cost over that time. So I think a clear distinction needs to be made between the two forms of borrowing. But currently, we're borrowing, even if the economy...
But it doesn't make any difference. It doesn't matter whether you're borrowing to pay the groceries or borrowing to create the new road system in this country. You've still got to borrow that money. It's still got to be paid back from the current account and from my taxes. Because, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And so, the word infrastructure deficit gets thrown around a lot. And people imply, we just need to throw more money at infrastructure. But, Matt Birchall from the New Zealand Initiative has done some really good digging into, our infrastructure deficit. We've got some of the worst productivity in the OECD in terms of our return on our infrastructure spending. So it's not just a matter of throwing more money into it. But we would argue that there's so much fat and waste in the government system that actually we can cut back on that, get us into a surplus, and then where we are borrowing, it should be for, good value for money investment that's going to pay off in the long term, not borrowing to throw more money at the wages of public servants that are doing nothing or piling it into even more corporate welfare.
Yeah, but I guess my problem with infrastructural deficits and everybody arguing that suddenly we need more stuff is that the level of planning, of budgetary planning of most of the major projects in this country, Connor, are so bad, and it doesn't matter whether it's local government or central government in this country, that we all end up paying 2-3 times what we thought we were going to pay for it when it was actually budgeted for. Transmission Gully, I think, stands as rather a good testament to that. Here's a public-private partnership. It's gone to shit, to be perfectly honest with you. It's spent, I think, 2-3 times what was estimated to spend currently, and I'm struggling to see what the economic gain might be. Is it just taken off 20 minutes of a drive to Wellington? What do you do? If we're going to have that level of spending in this country, aren't we in trouble?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there needs to be some serious reform around how we do infrastructure funding and financing. It's absolutely beyond belief that any project ever that gets forecasted, you seem to have to add, at least another 50%, if not more, onto that in order to get near where the final figure is going to be. And if it's so consistently wrong, you would have thought that they would upgrade the forecast, but then they do that and then it blows out even more. And so I think you do need some kind of, some more discipline around that, but also probably the other part of it is taking out some of the political uncertainty from that. If you've got one party coming in and promising to build something and then the next one coming in and cancelling it, that creates a lot of uncertainty for investors, and that can drive up costs as well. So, there's the New Zealand Initiative have done quite a bit of good work in this space. I'm not strictly an expert in the complex world of infrastructure funding and financing, but there's certainly not a lot of work that needs to be done there.
I was also thinking another one I could have added would be New Zealand Rail and the ferries. Dear Lord, what a disaster. How do people keep their jobs in these conditions? That's what I want to know, Connor.
Yeah, and Kiwi Rail is probably a great example of the government doing incredibly badly, or a state-owned enterprise. As far as I'm aware, I don't think they've ever paid a dividend, even though, technically they're required to do that. But yeah, you look at the ferry bailout, even there was a briefing, I think, last year to Grant Robertson saying they estimate they'll only need $300 million more, and then a couple of months later asking Nicola Willis for more than $1 billion extra. And so, Kiwi Rail, and you look for, especially at the Inter-Islander ferry, you have to wonder whether or not, they are the best people to be running that. You've already got Blue Bridge, which runs privately there. I'm interested to see whether or not that could be run privately without the government being involved. Obviously, some of that infrastructure might need some government support, but we simply can't afford just to keep piling more and more money into stuff that makes, frankly, no financial sense.
The government is starting, I think tenderly, I have to be saying, tentatively, to reduce the size of the state, Connor. As you know, with hundreds rather than, I think they're up to 5,000 now, estimated, not all of those are real jobs because some of those are vacancies they're simply not going to fill, cuts to the public sector. 18,000 extra public servants have been employed since 2017 for bugger all discernible improvement in public service in this country. Does Nicola Willis need to still keep attacking the public sector as a way in which to reduce government spending?
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, you made the point, 18,000 extra over 6 years, and they're proposing to cut 4,500 roles. So that's another important distinction. So there's 18,000 extra full-time equivalents. Some of those roles that are getting cut are part-time roles or they're vacant. So it's not actually 4,500 people that have lost their job and saving the taxpayer a bit of coin. But I think the government, for the most part, has gone about this the wrong way. They've left those very same chief executives that oversaw the huge growth and spending without the a comparative increase in output. They're leaving those same people in charge of finding savings. If we were in charge of it, we would be going through those budgets line by line and actually, in a lot of cases for government departments, zero-basing it and saying, well, if we didn't have this role today, would we create it? If we didn't have this work program today, would we create it? And we think that there's absolutely billions of dollars in there that you could cut out and most New Zealanders wouldn't notice.